The sun had just begun to stretch its golden rays over the sleepy town of Brookridge, signaling the start of another peaceful morning at the local farmers' market. The small, community-driven market was nestled at the heart of the town, and its rhythmic buzz brought a sense of calm to the residents who lived in the shadow of the distant hills. The sounds of carts rolling, gentle chatter, and the soft clink of coins in hand were the early melodies that greeted the town. Amongst the rows of farm-fresh produce and handmade goods, one particular booth stood out, managed by Michael Dawson and his daughter, Lily. Michael, a former military officer, had traded in his combat boots for work boots after leaving behind his service to raise Lily on his own. A quiet man by nature, he had poured his heart into providing for his daughter after the sudden death of his wife, Sarah. She had been his compass, the love of his life. But now, it was just him and Lily, navigating the world together. Their booth, brimming with ripe tomatoes, crisp apples, and freshly picked vegetables, was a symbol of their bond, a reminder of the simpler life they now led, far from the turmoil of Michael's past. Lily, only 13, was a striking young girl, but not for the reasons most people might notice. She wasn't the tallest or the most outgoing, and her size often drew teasing from her peers. But her heart was big, full of courage and defiance against the world's cruel judgments. Her mother had always told her, "It's not the size of your body that matters, Lily, it's the size of your heart." Those words had stayed with her, echoing in her mind as she stood behind the booth, carefully arranging the produce. But since her mother's passing, those words had started to feel hollow. It was difficult to hold on to hope when the world seemed so determined to bring her down. Beside Lily stood Rex, a Belgian Malinois, with dark, intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through anyone who dared to approach them. Rex wasn't just a dog. He was Lily's protector. Trained for high-risk situations, Rex had been a part of the family for as long as Lily could remember. While other children had pets for companionship, Rex was her constant source of reassurance. His presence made her feel safe, especially in moments like these, when the world seemed to look down upon her. The air was thick with the earthy scent of fresh vegetables and the distant hum of conversation, when the sound of revving engines broke through the calm. Lily's eyes flickered up, her hands pausing in midair as the unmistakable roar of motorcycle engines rumbled down the street. Her heart skipped a beat, and she instinctively looked toward her father, whose calm eyes had already locked on the source of the noise. 5 motorcycles, gleaming in the morning sunlight, came into view, their riders clad in black leather jackets adorned with patches. The riders, known as the Thunder Riders, had a reputation that preceded them. Known for their rowdy behavior and occasional trouble, they were hardly the kind of individuals anyone wanted to mess with. As they pulled into the parking lot of the market, a hush seemed to fall over the area. The usual bustling voices and laughter softened as the bikers dismounted and sauntered over to the stalls. Lily's hands gripped the edge of the table, her mind racing. She had seen these men before, in town, in passing, but never up close. She knew of their reputation. They were trouble, the kind of people who didn't care about others, whose laughter was like the sound of an approaching storm. The leader of the gang, a man named Jake Malone, was the first to approach their booth. His tall figure towered over Lily, casting a long shadow across the table. His dark eyes scanned her, a smirk pulling at the corners of his lips as he looked over the carefully arranged vegetables. Lily's heart raced in her chest, but she stood her ground, her eyes locking onto his, a quiet defiance in her gaze. Jake's smirk widened as he reached over, picking up a tomato from the stand. He squeezed it in his large hand, crushing it effortlessly. The red juice spilled over his fingers, dripping onto the wooden table. "What do we have here?" he sneered, looking down at Lily, a little girl trying to make some pocket change. Lily flinched, the sight of the ruined produce hitting her like a slap in the face. But she didn't break her gaze. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her scared. Behind her, Rex's low growl rumbled, his body tense with alertness. His eyes narrowed, never leaving Jake's figure. Lily's hand brushed against Rex's fur, feeling the strength and loyalty that emanated from him. She wasn't alone, and she knew it. Her father, though standing in the background, was keenly watching the situation unfold. His years of military training had taught him to assess threats with precision, and this was no different. Michael Dawson had been trained to deal with dangerous situations, but nothing had ever felt as personal as this. He had sworn to protect his daughter, and he would not let anyone, especially some biker bully, get away with disrespecting her. His calm demeanor never wavered, but his mind was working quickly, taking in every detail. The bikers were trying to intimidate his daughter, and they were going to find out the hard way that they had picked the wrong family to mess with. As the bikers closed in, Michael quietly positioned himself, making sure Lily remained within his reach, and Rex was ready to act. The storm that had come to Brookridge was about to get a lot more intense, but Michael knew how to weather it. The market had grown quieter, and all eyes were on the confrontation that was about to unfold. But Lily, with her father by her side and Rex by her feet, was ready. No one would break her spirit today. Not the bikers, not the bullies. Today, the storm would meet its match. The atmosphere around Lily and her father became heavier with each passing moment. The air, once filled with the sounds of friendly chatter and the clinking of coins, was now thick with tension. As Jake Malone, the leader of the Thunder Riders, stood towering over her, the market seemed to fade into the background, leaving only the looming threat that was this man and his gang. The light-hearted hum of the market seemed to shift into a strained, uneasy silence as onlookers quietly observed, some pretending to go about their business, others watching with bated breath. Jake's eyes were cold, calculating, as he studied Lily, a sneer forming across his face. He wasn't just some troublemaker. He was a man who found amusement in other people's discomfort. As he stood there, his gang began to circle the booth, slowly closing in, their motorcycles parked like silent predators waiting to pounce. Each biker, with their tattoos and leather vests, exuded an air of intimidation, their presence alone enough to make the bravest of men uneasy. But Lily wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing fear in her eyes. "What's the matter, kid? You don't look like someone who belongs at a place like this," Jake taunted, his voice dripping with mockery. He reached for another tomato from the booth, crushing it with his powerful grip. The soft fruit was no match for his strength, and the juice splattered across the wooden table. The sight of it made Lily's stomach turn. The tomato was one of the first her father had grown this season, and watching it ruined, under Jake's careless hands, made her blood boil. Lily took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. Her eyes never wavered from Jake's, and although her hands trembled slightly, she refused to back down. Behind her, Rex, the Belgian Malinois, stood like a statue, his alert posture a silent warning to the bikers. His deep growl rumbled from his chest, a sound that made the hair on the back of Lily's neck stand up. Rex was always by her side, his protective instincts honed through years of specialized training. But even Rex, with all his training, was at the mercy of the situation, waiting for a signal from Lily or her father. "You're in the wrong place, sweetheart," Jake continued, his voice low and mocking as he eyed her up and down. "Farm girl, huh? What kind of a name is Lily? Sounds like something weak. Maybe you should stay in your lane." Lily could feel her heart pounding in her chest. This wasn't the first time she had been ridiculed for her size or her name, but it was the first time that someone had crossed a line like this. She clenched her fists, taking a deep breath to steady her thoughts. Her father's teachings echoed in her mind. Don't let anyone define you by what they see. You are stronger than they think. She had to believe that now more than ever. Despite her anger, Lily kept her voice steady as she spoke. "You're ruining my father's tomatoes, and you're wasting your time." She forced the words out, determined not to let him see how much his mockery had stung. Jake's face twisted into a grin, clearly amused by her defiance. "Oh, I'm not the one wasting time, kid. I'm having fun here. Look at you, standing up to me. That's funny. You think your dog's going to stop me?" At that, Rex's growl intensified, the sound like a warning to the bikers who stood around them, their eyes now watching the dog closely. Lily placed her hand on Rex's collar, silently urging him to stay calm. She could feel the tension building in the air, and every second seemed to stretch longer than the last. Michael, standing just behind Lily, surveyed the situation, his military-trained eyes taking in every detail. He knew the danger. Jake Malone and his gang weren't just bullies. They were out for something more. Michael had dealt with worse in his past, and while he had left that life behind, it seemed that trouble had found its way to his doorstep again. But this time, it wasn't him who would be facing the danger head-on. It was his daughter. He had made a promise to Sarah, Lily's late mother, to protect their daughter and give her the best life he could. That promise would not be broken. Not today. Not ever. Lily glanced over her shoulder at her father. Michael stood tall, his expression calm but unreadable. His eyes, hardened by years of military service, scanned the bikers with precise attention. He noted their positions, their body language, and the subtle ways they shifted their weight. They weren't here by accident. This wasn't just a random act of harassment. Michael felt the weight of the situation settle in. He knew what was coming, and he was ready to face it head-on. Jake, sensing the tension in the air, took another step closer to Lily, his eyes gleaming with malicious intent. "What's your daddy going to do?" "He's just a farmer now. He isn't a soldier anymore." Michael's response was calm, but his voice held an undercurrent of steel. "You don't know anything about me, Jake. Keep your distance." His gaze never wavered as he took a step forward, closing the gap between himself and Jake. Jake smirked, clearly amused. "So you think you can threaten me, old man?" "I'm not threatening you," Michael replied, his tone calm but filled with quiet authority. "I'm giving you a warning. Stay away from my daughter." For a moment, it seemed like Jake would press further. But then, something shifted in the air. Michael's presence, the calm confidence he exuded, made the biker hesitate. Jake had always been the one to instill fear in others, but now, for the first time, he felt a flicker of uncertainty. Rex's low growl, Michael's unflinching gaze, and Lily's quiet defiance had turned the tables. Jake, despite his bravado, had underestimated the strength of the people standing before him. The bikers, sensing the change, exchanged uneasy glances. The tension in the air was palpable. This wasn't going to be an easy confrontation. But just as the situation seemed ready to erupt, Michael spoke again, his voice firm. "I said, stay away." Jake hesitated for a moment longer before stepping back, his smirk faltering. His gang followed suit, reluctantly giving space. As the bikers turned to leave, the tension that had clung to the market began to dissolve, but the unease remained. Michael knew this wasn't over. He knew that the bikers had come for a reason, and they wouldn't be satisfied with just a simple confrontation. But for now, they had won the battle. It was a small victory, but it was enough to show the bikers that they were dealing with more than they had bargained for. As the bikers began to retreat, the uneasy silence still hung in the air. The rumble of their motorcycles faded, but the lingering tension in the market remained like a heavy fog. Lily stood motionless, her heart still racing in her chest. She could feel the adrenaline coursing through her veins, and yet there was something more. A strange sense of power and defiance that had taken root in her. It was as though, in that moment, she had found a strength she never knew she had. She was not the scared girl that the bikers had thought her to be. She was more than that. Her father, Michael, stood just behind her, his calm presence a quiet reassurance in the storm. He placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch steady and grounding. "You did well," he said, his voice low but filled with pride. "You held your ground, and that's what matters." Lily nodded, but she couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was far from over. Something about the way Jake Malone and his gang had acted didn't sit right with her. They had left too easily, as though they were waiting for something. She glanced toward the street where their motorcycles had sped off. Feeling the weight of her thoughts, There was a sense of finality in their departure, but also a strange unease that followed them. Michael, too, was on edge. He had seen enough in his years of service to know when something wasn't right. The bikers weren't just passing through. They had been testing the waters, seeing how far they could push. Michael's protective instincts flared, but he kept his composure. He had learned long ago that showing concern in front of Lily wouldn't help the situation. She needed to see strength, not fear. "Let's get everything packed up," Michael said, trying to sound casual, though his mind was already working through the possibilities. "We'll head home early today." Lily nodded, but as they began to pack their things, her mind wandered back to the bikers and their behavior. Jake's mocking tone, his casual disregard for personal space. It had all been a game to him, and Lily couldn't help but feel that there was something more beneath it all. The bikers hadn't just been rude, they'd been calculating, and she had the distinct feeling that their encounter wasn't just about intimidation. There was something deeper, something they weren't saying, and it troubled her. As they loaded the truck and began to head out of the market, Michael caught sight of Sheriff Davis walking toward them. The sheriff, a tall, steady man with a weathered face, had been the law in Brookridge for as long as anyone could remember. His steady demeanor and sharp eye for detail made him respected by the townspeople, but Michael could see the concern in his eyes as he approached. "Morning, Michael," Sheriff Davis said, tipping his hat. "Quite a bit of excitement today, huh?" Michael nodded, his expression neutral. "Just the usual rowdy bunch, Sheriff. Nothing too serious." Sheriff Davis, however, wasn't convinced. His eyes narrowed as he glanced toward the spot where the bikers had been. "I'm not so sure about that. I've had reports of those bikers causing trouble up north. They've been moving through small towns, stirring up all sorts of issues. They're not just your average troublemakers, Michael." Michael's expression darkened. He had suspected as much. Did they threaten Lily? "Not directly, but there's something about them," Sheriff Davis said, lowering his voice slightly. "They've been getting bolder, more aggressive. I'm just telling you to be careful. These guys are organized. They're not here by accident." Michael's protective instincts flared, and he clenched his jaw, resisting the urge to ask more questions. The sheriff's words were a confirmation of what he already feared. The bikers weren't just causing trouble for fun. They were testing the waters. Michael didn't know what they were after, but he wasn't about to sit idly by and wait for them to make their next move. "They won't get away with it," Michael muttered, his tone colder than he intended. He didn't want to alarm Lily, but the reality of the situation was sinking in fast. He needed to keep her safe, no matter what. Lily, who had been listening quietly from the truck, felt the weight of the conversation. She didn't like the idea of being a target, and the thought that the bikers had been intentionally looking for trouble unsettled her. But what disturbed her more was the sense that she had been a part of something larger than just a random encounter. She wasn't sure what it was yet, but she knew that whatever was coming next wouldn't be easy. As they drove back toward their farm, the day grew darker, and the quiet hum of the engine seemed to reflect the stillness in Lily's mind. She couldn't stop thinking about the bikers. The way Jake had looked at her, his mocking words, there was something unsettling about the whole encounter. She glanced out the window, watching the trees blur by as her thoughts spiraled. Her father, sensing her unease, glanced over at her. "You're thinking too much," he said softly. "You did good today. We'll keep an eye on things. Just remember, you're not alone in this." Lily nodded, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting for them, just out of sight. The bikers may have left for now, but they weren't finished yet. And when they returned, Lily knew they would be ready. With her father by her side and Rex at her feet, she was no longer the scared girl she had once been. She was strong, and she would face whatever came next with the same courage she had shown today. As the truck rolled on, the road stretching out before them, the calm of the evening settled over Lily. She knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, as a family. And with that thought, a quiet determination took root in her heart. The confrontation was far from over, but she was ready. She would stand her ground, no matter what came next. The night had settled over Brookridge, and a heavy quiet hung in the air, broken only by the soft creaking of the truck as it made its way along the winding country road. Lily stared out the window, her thoughts still consumed by the events of the day. She had never imagined that a simple visit to the market would lead to a confrontation like that. Yet here she was, sitting in the truck, her heart still racing from the encounter with Jake and his gang. Though the bikers had left, the unsettling feeling still lingered. They hadn't been acting like ordinary bullies. They had a purpose, and Lily couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over. Her father, Michael, had remained unusually quiet since their departure from the market, his eyes on the road ahead, his hands gripping the steering wheel with steady precision. He wasn't one to show fear, but Lily knew him well enough to understand when something was weighing on his mind. She could sense the unease in the way he kept glancing in the rearview mirror, his mind clearly focused on the bikers' sudden appearance and the threat they posed. Lily's fingers fidgeted with the hem of her jacket, her thoughts spinning in circles. She wanted to ask her father what he was thinking, but the words felt stuck in her throat. The market had been her world, a place where she felt safe, where she could escape the teasing and isolation she often felt at school. But today the market had become a battlefield, and the safety she once took for granted now seemed fragile, as if everything she knew could be taken away in an instant. "Dad, do you think they'll come back?" she asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Michael didn't respond immediately. His eyes remained fixed on the road, his grip on the wheel firm, but his jaw tightened as if he were considering the question carefully. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke. "They might," he said, his voice calm but tinged with a firmness that only a father could have. "But we won't be caught off guard again. I won't let anyone hurt you, Lily. You're stronger than they think." Lily nodded, but it didn't erase the knot in her stomach. She trusted her father more than anyone, but she couldn't help but wonder what kind of people Jake and his gang really were. They weren't just bullies. They were part of something bigger, something dangerous. She had seen it in their eyes, in the way they moved, like they were testing her, pushing her to see how far they could go. And what worried her most was that she wasn't sure what their endgame was. As they neared the edge of the farm, the truck slowed to a stop, the headlights illuminating the familiar outline of their small home nestled between the sprawling fields. Michael shifted into park, but neither of them moved for a long moment. Lily could feel the weight of the silence between them, the unspoken understanding that the day wasn't over, that the calm they had found wasn't permanent. "Let's check the perimeter before we settle in for the night," Michael suggested, finally breaking the stillness. "Stay close, okay?" Lily nodded again, her heart steadying with the comfort of her father's presence. She followed him as they made their way out of the truck, and together they moved toward the back of the house, where the shadow of the barn loomed in the moonlight. Rex, who had been sitting silently by their side since they arrived home, trotted beside them, his ears alert, his nose twitching as he surveyed the area. The air was still, too still, and Lily couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. She glanced around, her eyes scanning the edges of the property. But there was nothing. No movement, no sounds, just the quiet rustling of the trees in the breeze. Her father, though, didn't seem concerned. He walked with purpose, his military training still evident in his every movement. After they completed their check of the property, Michael gave a slight nod. "Looks clear," he said, his voice low. "We'll lock everything up for the night. But don't worry. If they come back, we'll be ready." Lily felt a sense of relief wash over her, though she still couldn't fully shake the tension that had settled in her chest. But as they returned to the house and closed the door behind them, the comfort of their home seemed to push the unease away, if only for a moment. As they sat down at the kitchen table, Michael looked at Lily, his eyes softening. "You know, your mother used to tell me that we can't control the storms that come into our lives, but we can choose how we weather them." Lily felt her throat tighten, the memory of her mother's words bringing a lump to her throat. Sarah had been the strong one, the one who had taught her to face life with courage, even when it felt impossible. She could almost hear her mother's voice, as if she were sitting right there beside them. "I miss her, Dad," Lily whispered, her voice catching. "I know you do," Michael said gently. "I miss her too, but she's always with us, in the way we live our lives, in the strength she passed on to you. You've got her courage, Lily. You're stronger than you know." Lily took a deep breath, letting the words sink in. She wasn't just her mother's daughter. She was her father's daughter too. And today, for the first time, she felt it. She had stood up to the bikers, faced down the bullies with the strength she didn't even know she had, and made it through unscathed. As the night settled around them, Lily sat back in her chair, her mind racing. She wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring, or if the bikers would return. But one thing was certain. She wasn't the same person she had been when she woke up that morning. Today, she had discovered something deep within herself, something that would stay with her no matter what came next. With her father and Rex by her side, she felt a sense of peace settle over her, knowing that no matter the storm, they would face it together. The victory wasn't in chasing away the bikers, it was in standing up to them in the first place, in finding the courage to hold her ground. And that was something no one could take away from her.